named for the great American transcendentalist writer and Unitarian minister Ralph Waldo Emerson. We are an active, liberal, religious community that has been part of the West Valley for over 65 years. I welcome you to this community of hope and love, of peace and justice, of wholeness and healing. It is wonderful to be with you all for worship this morning, both in the sanctuary and online. In this sanctuary of spiritual freedom, where we celebrate and encourage the diversity of heritage, culture, beliefs, and experience shaping our individual visions of truth. Emerson acknowledges the Gabrielino, Tongva, and Chumash peoples as the original inhabitants of where our church stands today, part of the world the Gabrielino Tongva know as Tovangar. It remains part of their lasting identity and heritage. Our existence as a spiritual community can never be fully understood without appreciating the depth of the loss of their land in generations past and the enduring hopes for the renewed vitality of these cultures in years to come. This is my 24th school year teaching music in LAUSD. Thank you. Therefore, the 3 weeks from December 19th to January 6th was my 24th winter break. Always just the right number of days of having no set schedule on weekdays, and thus being able to sleep later than usual, walk for errands in my neighborhood or to the local park, exercise earlier in the day, see friends and visiting family, and of course, experience the genuine thrill of shopping for groceries and other necessities, cleaning and doing laundry. I always set goals of accomplishing tasks such as decluttering and reorganizing the spaces in my apartment, schoolwork, deep cleaning that I had been putting off for too long, and other productive activities. I have grand visions of crossing off these items on my ambitious to-do list. Some I get done, and some I do not, but that is fine, because for most of my winter breaks, it has been a staycation, during which I relish the free time to do not what is productive for my goals, but what is pure fun. Toward the end of this winter break, I got an emotional lift just from gathering, playing exercises, and concert pieces to teach in the rest of the school year, affirming my love of my profession. Every January, after I return to the reality of teaching instrumental music at my 5 elementary schools, I am content to gradually work at the goals I did not get done during winter break without self-induced pressure. And I like to live that way. If you are joining us in worship for the first time, we welcome you to our service and invite you to fill out your information in the online guest book document in the chat or the guest book in the foyer for those of you here in the sanctuary, so you may be informed about future services and other opportunities for gathering with the Emerson community during the week. We also have a website that is regularly updated with church information. If you would like to have a joy or sorrow read aloud later in the service during our embracing meditation, submit it by clicking on the link, which is also posted in the chat. Those of you in the sanctuary, if you have a time, you might want to write it in the Book of Life, perhaps over here during the offering. That would be your opportunity to do that if you haven't done so already. Everyone is invited to join in our virtual coffee hour in Zoom in service after the service for fellowship and conversation. And for those of you here, of course, we'll have our pavilion gathering after the service with coffee and drinks and refreshments and fellowship and good conversation there as well. It is my pleasure to introduce our guest preacher today. He really needs no introduction for most of you. Pastor Joshua Berg, not Reverend.
Right, I did, yes.
Okay, I'm glad you said that. All right. For those of you new to Emerson, Joshua served as the temporary minister when Reverend Matthew was on sabbatical from January to May last year. Following that, he graduated from Meadville Lombard Theological School, was ordained by Northwest UU in Southfield, Michigan, and was welcomed into preliminary fellowship with the UUA. This past August, he began a year-long residency as a chaplain at Children's Hospital, Los Angeles. Now, Pastor Joshua will tell us a story for all ages.
Someone else will read the story. It's pre-recorded, but this was one of my favorite poems growing up. I'm sure you're all familiar with it, and when I thought of allowing us some spiritual space and time and giving ourselves permission to not be perfect, it's the thing that I thought of first. And the text of which I'm sure, David, as a teacher for 24 years, you have heard many times. It is called Sick by Shel Silverstein.
Sick by Shel Silverstein. I cannot go to school today, said little Peggy Ann McKay. I have the measles and the mumps, a gash, a rash, and purple bumps. My mouth is wet, my throat is dry. I'm going blind in my right eye. My tonsils are as big as rocks. I've counted 16 chicken pox. Oh, and there's one more that's 17. And don't you think my face looks green? My leg is cut, my eyes are blue. It might be instamatic flu. I cough and sneeze and gasp and choke. I'm sure that my left leg is broke. My hip hurts when I move my chin. My belly button's caving in. My back is wrenched, my ankle's sprained. My appendix pains each time it rains. My nose is cold, my toes are numb. I have a sliver in my thumb. My neck is stiff, my voice is weak. I hardly whisper when I speak. My tongue is filling up my mouth. I think my hair is falling out. My elbow's bent. My spine ain't straight. My temperature is 108. My brain is shrunk. I cannot hear. There is a hole inside my ear. I have a hangnail and my heart is... What? What's that? What's that, you say? You say today is Saturday? Goodbye. I'm going out to play.
Kids, don't get any ideas.
Oh, we forgot to do the UU affirmation. We will now do our UU affirmation. Yeah, there it is up there. I forgot to mention that to you. Sorry. Yeah, it's out of the habit. Okay. If you know the hand signals, join in. Otherwise, if you don't, watch your neighbors. We are Unitarian, Universalists, a people of open minds, loving hearts, and welcoming hands. The words of the offering are by Erica A. Hewitt. The offering that we take each Sunday isn't just a stale habit. It's an opportunity to recommit to this place and to this people. Our offering is an affirmation, a yes. When we give, we say yes to something we value. With our gifts freely given, may we say yes to the values of our faith. May our offering help us and practice Unitarian Universalism within and beyond our congregation as tools to empower our mission. Those of you online, you may donate online to the church website, donate.emersonuc.org, or through the Vanco mobile app, or you can always mail a check to the church. The offering will now be greatly received from the congregation. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live.
Happy Chinese Lunar New Year, by the way. It's the year of the rabbit, if I'm not mistaken, which it's funny, I don't know if you've ever seen a magic show, but they always have these, it looks like a magic bag. So I was thinking of pulling a rabbit out of a hat. But happy Lunar New Year. We're talking about spiritual practices today and allowing ourselves the freedom to not be perfect. So I don't have necessarily the words that we usually use for joys and sorrows. Give myself, it's okay. But one thing that I consider a spiritual practice that we don't often think of as a spiritual practice is just being together in community. What we call in the hospital just the ministry of presence. And so we will take part in that spiritual practice. We are already, just by being together today. And another aspect of being together is being able to share our hearts, share joys, share our concerns with each other, truly being in community and communing together, heart to heart. So now is the time in the service where we do that. We share our joys and concerns. We have this book, and some people have written some, so I will read them first. I went to a gathering of remembrance for my uncle Larry Cosgrove, who passed away at the age of 97. Very moving, many great memories shared. Thinking of my parents today, who passed away this weekend in the past. One of them last year, and the other the year before. Brian Nelson. Condolences, sorry for your loss. The Walt Disney community is mourning the passing of Nelson Meacham, a dear friend and colleague this week. My husband, Marty, helped sit the final vigil with the family these past few weeks. Lynn Prager. Thank you for your spiritual care work, comforting that family. P.S. Nelson helped create Disney World in Taiwan and France. Wow. Do I ask for any others? Or? Oh, okay. It's been 8 months, so I forget the routine necessarily. I didn't see any joys and sorrows in the online Joys and Sorrows book, but
We have a meditation where we do the bowl. That's right.
we have what?
Sorry.
That's all right. But I'm sure there are many joys and concerns that we hold in our hearts. Sometimes it's difficult to share, and just being with people, knowing that they're feeling your energy is enough, is more than enough. So let's feel each other's energy now as we do a brief meditation. I think we have a video of Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams, who will lead us in this meditation. And I'll ring the bell.
No, it doesn't have to be really vigorous, but we want to just like feel and get in the practice of like feeling and connecting with our core, right? Because again, so much of the way that our society currently works, it's about cutting us off from that, right? And that cuts us off from what matters. And then find our seat, right? It's really important that we take our seat with intention, not just plop down in it, right? It's not just like a chair. It's like you're really, truly taking your seat, right? The seat of your power, right? You feel a sense of like connection, like your roots right down through to the earth. She's got you. She can hold you. And so you feel that's where you get that integrity from, by sending that taproot down, right? And saying like, I'm here. And spiral the energy upward, crown towards the sky. Crown goes up towards the sky and it drops the chin. And we feel what kind of dignity? What's the thing about inherent dignity? That's right. You don't have to earn it, and it can't be taken away. It's really important for us to get that. You don't have to earn it, and it cannot be taken away. There's not an incident, there's not something that can happen to you, there's not something that you can do in which that inherent dignity is taken away. You just have to choose it again and again, to choose to step into it. And it's yours. So we align ourselves first vertically. Right? And then we extend out horizontally. Right? And that's where the sense of like our generosity and giving and openness can happen once we're aligned vertically. And if we're not grounded and we extend outward, right, then we're off balance. So we feel our sense of just our width, and so maybe drawing your shoulders up and out. And then you extend into the space and feel the space around you. And extend that space further as you feel relationship with others. And further. Fill the whole room, looking out on the horizon, the generations in front of you, feeling the generations behind you, and really taking your place right here. And then finally connecting and organizing all of your action around what matters. We can't always find our yoga mat, we can't always find our meditation cushion, we can't always like burst out into ecstatic dance, but we can take that 30 seconds, right, eye center in like 5 seconds flat. It's a muscle, you build it, you come back to what matters. You keep building that muscle, you come back to what matters. And as long as you keep coming back to what matters for you, we all benefit.
Each Sunday when we gather here for worship, we offer a space in the service for people to speak out loud into the space, joys or concerns, or sorrows they have in their life that are on their mind. When I ring the sounding bowl, you may speak that into this space. Before I do that, I want to definitely acknowledge our thoughts, prayers, and support with the victims and families of the mass shooting in Monterey Park last night, and hope for recovery of the 10 victims who are hospitalized. Feel free to speak your words into the space after the bowl is rung. And let us hold in our hearts those thoughts and feelings that are too tender and sensitive to be spoken out loud. A reading by David Rankin. I prefer the modest joys, the understated incarnations, the distilled moments of simple pleasure that are sneaky blessings to everyone. The capacity to play and to be renewed by a restful sleep. The whole range of tastes, from sweet to bitter, and the mysteries in between. The delicate, slender fingers of an infant child. The color of sky and sea and the vast complex of hues that melt through the eyes. The sheer wonder of sound shaking the inner soul with tones of depths and heights. The tender remembrance of times that were good and whole. The rustic places that lunged out and lodged in the heart. The persons who shared their secret loves in moments beyond all measuring. The coming of day and the sureness of the return of night. The loyalty of a pet when humans forget to care. The aloneness of solitude that stirs the mind in new directions. The muted meetings that each of us finds in the cycle of life and that hold fast through the fearful rhythms. And all of the subtle and lumbering awarenesses that pulse in us, from which our hearts sing their joyful amen. And now our choir will offer I Dream a World by Andre Thomas.
Thank you. That was so beautiful. It really, it's amazing with 5 people, just the richness that can be produced. And it's equally pleasing for me because from this angle, I can not just hear the choir, but I can see Adam and Conrad dancing in the tech booth as well. So it's really fun. So an artist, a friend of mine named Noah Scalin, who's a pretty big artist right now, has written a lot of books on creativity. He started out with this project where he said, I'm going to create a skull a day for a year. That's right, I said skull, every day for a year. And Noah, he committed to this purposeful, this intentional, this daily act. And he put checks in place for himself, such as he shared it on social media so that encouraged and motivated. And let's be honest, when you tell someone, when you share it on social media, it pretty much forced him to keep up this practice because now people were following along. And he set the rule that I mentioned. Each creation had to be a skull, 365 skulls. So rather than limiting his creative expression, these boundaries, these rules, these pressures, if you will, actually encouraged more creative expression rather than distracting him from his day-to-day life because the anxiety of worrying, how am I going to keep it up? How am I going to create a skull, 365 unique skulls? Rather than distracting him from that day-to-day, this practice, he told me it actually ended up forcing him to focus his energy at one point each day. And that forcing him to focus enabled him then to turn around and return to the rest of the craziness of the day, reset, refocused, and anew. This practice served to center his spirit. It was what I would call a spiritual practice, therefore. And when I began seminary a few years ago, I was told as part of our requirements, we were required to engage in a regular spiritual practice as part of our degree. This was a requirement. And I imagine when I started, it would be something strict like that something I had to do, forced to do every day, like my friend Noah's Skull a Day project. And it made me a little anxious. I tried many things. I tried meditation. I tried journaling. Nothing really stuck as a daily practice. See, if there isn't anything really forcing you to do the practice, like making a promise on social media, then committing to it, it's really, really hard. It takes intention, takes work, takes time. But there was something forcing me to do it. It was a requirement for my Master of Divinity. And I didn't have the time to figure something out. I needed the spiritual centering very quickly. There was no time to build up a practice. And it flummoxed me quite a bit because I didn't have the resources at the time to join, as Reverend Kyoto Williams said, join some sort of Zendo or a spiritual gym. I didn't have the discipline really at that point in my life to build up the meditation muscle, which I am working on now slowly. And with all the schoolwork and all the reading that I had to do, I also didn't have the time or the mental energy to commit to something like journaling on top of it. The fact is, however, it is especially during these times of existential exhaustion, like what we are all currently going through now, and what we certainly went through during the pandemic. It is especially during these times that we all really need that spiritual practice, that spiritual centering. And like I did in school, we needed to start right away. We don't have time to work a year on meditative practice. We need it now. Yet few of us, honestly, have the wherewithal to run out and join goat yoga, or have you ever heard of that? It's really cool. Or goat yoga, or buy a $100 Zafu meditation cushion. We don't always have that, let alone make an artwork each day for a year. Honestly, those types of things are just not going to happen often. So let me put your mind more at ease about your own ability to engage in spiritual centering by returning to my friend Noah's skull a day. That's not it. Is it after this? Keep going? Oh, going backwards. Yeah, so you got to press. There we go. Okay. Oh, okay, hold on a sec. I'm going to try to get to the first one here. Okay, there we go. Yes. Some days the skulls would be quite complex and took a lot of logistics, like when he enlisted his friends for this nude skull. This was day 357, actually. He did it another day. Some skulls were time-consuming, were intentional, like his detailed painting of a dog skull he made on day 73. It took quite a lot of focus. Or the skull on day 10, made from the cutouts of each state of the USA regrouped. It's all 50 states. That took some time that day. Other times, however, he simply had to just make do. He didn't have the time or the energy. Like the first skull he created when he set this project. He hadn't planned, so it was a simple paper cutout. That's how he started. And there were extremely busy days, like the one where he just arranged toothpicks into a skull. Day number 176, as he ate in between all of his meetings. He had to do it. Or the day he was traveling and speaking and he was in a hotel room and he made a skull out of the sheet from his bed. Had to do it every day. Then there were those days, sometimes a few days in a row, like days number 11 and days number 12, just over a week into the project. It was very soon. He was just simply too overwhelmed. He didn't know how he's going to do it. So those days, it was all he could do to just even think about making a skull. But when your awareness is heightened, even in a moment, you notice things you otherwise would not have noticed. So just thinking about his spiritual practice, being intentional about it in the moment, even momentarily, centered him enough to stumble upon skulls. He found some scraps of metal for day 11, just laying around. Day 12, he didn't find anything, just staring into space, giving himself a break, trying to find something, anything that might feed his spirit. Because he was intentional about it, he noticed this, the cloud skull. It takes a minute. You can see it. So skull a day is one form of ritualized centering spiritual practice can take. Now, if you have a more religious bent, there are tons of examples of spiritual practice. There's all kinds of Christian meditative practices, spiritual practices. Growing up Jewish, there's a commandment found in the book of Leviticus to do what's called counting the Omer, which I believe I may have talked about that on Passover here, because it's around that holiday. Jews used to make this offering of an Omer at the temple. An Omer was a sheaf of grain at the temple in Jerusalem when it existed. And as the seasonal harvest began, they made the offering, and then they would count 49 days until the end of the harvest, when a final offering was made in gratitude for the fruits of the harvest, 49 days. The harvest and the counting of the Omer then began the day after Passover. And so when there was no more temple, when the temple didn't exist anymore, they didn't have to make the offering, this counting of the Omer became a daily spiritual practice anyways. Since it began at Passover, which is the story of the Jews gaining freedom from slavery in Egypt, instead of celebrating the fruits of the harvest, the Omer became a celebration of the fruits of each day's spiritual preparation in the desert leading up to receiving the Ten Commandments as they traveled, which is another celebration, receiving the Ten Commandments known as Shavuot, which occurs 49 days after Passover. For our Muslim siblings, for instance, Ramadan is a time of spiritual reflection and heightened worship. So those are some religious spiritual practices. And all of these religious rituals, they make the spirituality intentional by having checks and having rules in place. The Omer, for instance, it has to be counted in community, and each week it's often associated with one of what they call the 7 emanations of the Kabbalist practice, and those are loving kindness, might, beauty, victory, acknowledgement, foundation, and kingdom. Ramadan, it involves fasting. It involves extended prayer. There's also a set time period for both of these things. So like the rules that Noah set in place for Skull a Day, these restrictions promoted focus. They promoted intention. Now, even though there is absolutely a need for intentionality in daily spiritual practices, such as these religious practices, sometimes the pressure can be less overwhelming in your intentionality than the pressure to create an artwork daily. The Omer is just counting days. That's all it was. Just count every day, make sure you don't miss one, or sit in reflection on Ramadan. These are doable things, even and especially during times of existential exhaustion. There's still intentions we can have. They encourage practitioners to center themselves, enabling them to confront each new day, as the Jews might have done, lost in the desert, and prepare their spirits to confront the divine however one might imagine it. So I contend then that spiritual practice can be anything that recenters the spirit, whether it's creating an artwork or simply counting, as long as it's intentionally spirit-centering. Now, am I conflating the holy commandments to prepare one's spirit for connecting with the divine, to making skulls a Halloween arts and crafts project? Yes, I am. That is what I'm doing, although I wouldn't phrase it exactly that way, even though I just did. Defined more specifically, spiritual practice is anything that gives rise to a religious experience where one connects with the divine. And no, years of seminary have not turned me away from humanism. It just opened my mind a bit. So as a humanist Unitarian Universalist, I understand religious experience as a transformative experience of awe, as a connection to the larger and profound divine that is the living energy that pervades all within and outside of ourselves. Spiritual practice can be an hour of meditation. It can be a fasting pilgrimage to Mecca, or it can be a moment of reflection on a cloud that looks like a skull. Spiritual practice, it can lead to extraordinary experiences and enlightenment, but it can also lead to just a simple yet vitally important recentering of one's focus and one's energy that we often forget to do, recentering of our spirits. The writer Anne Lamott, who we've been quoting here, talked about, in the service today, existential exhaustion during the pandemic, or as she called it, COVID college. She said that her husband and her performed, and this is the name of the sermon, she called it the sacrament of putter and ploppage, or puttering and plopping. And this is not meant to be disrespectful to the idea of sacrament, which is also an important ritual that connects Christians to the divine. It is to say that if puttering around the house and plopping on the couch is all you have the spoons to do, which is often the case, but it is done purposefully to connect one's spirit to the larger divine energy, it too becomes sacred. It too becomes a spiritual practice. In the words, and I'm going to quote Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams from that meditation video because her words are worth repeating. In her words, Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams, and she was one of the first, if not the first, self-identified black mixed-race females to be ordained a Zen Buddhist priest. In her words, she wrote, "It's really important," I don't know if you remember her saying that, "we take our seat with intention, not just plop down in it. It's like you're really, truly taking your seat, the seat of your power. You feel a sense of connection of your roots right down through to the earth. She's got you. She can hold you. That's where you get the integrity from, by sending that tap root down. And that's plopping with intention as a spiritual practice." Anne Lamott also said, "Everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes." Even you. So that moment of unplugging, of, puttering or plopping, that moment, or pooping, that could be a spiritual practice too. That moment of unplugging is vital. If you can't get into a soul cycle right now, or you can't sit in the lotus position for an hour, just submit to the slight pressure of a purposeful daily spiritual unplug. Be intentional to stop for a few moments. Look at the sky while walking the dog. Close your eyes to navigate your soul during a commercial between episodes of Schitt's Creek. As many of you know, I'm working at Children's Hospital right now, Los Angeles, as a chaplain. It's been one of the most challenging but also rewarding experiences of my life. Unimaginable before I went in what I would experience. And if I ever questioned why my alma mater required us to have a spiritual practice, to focus on our own spirits, I now know. I can't walk into a patient's room if I don't take part in some sort of centering ritual. And for me, I look at this. I'm going to take off my my chalice cufflinks that I have. I look at my arm tattoo that says "Go out and enjoy," and has a butterfly. And I repeat that a few times before I go into the room. Go out and enjoy, go out and enjoy, go out and enjoy. And then I commit to doing that in that moment to the best of my ability. That's my spiritual practice. When I leave the room too, given some of the things I'm witness to in the hospital, recentering my spirit when I leave the room is almost more important. I was so emotionally worn down one day that when I hit that, the after lunch exhaustion where you just want to take a nap, I was Googling, how do you reset your energy quickly in the middle of the day? Is there a trick to it? Well, have you heard of a calf nap? Not a cat nap, a calf nap. You drink a cup of coffee, a whole cup of coffee down, maybe ice it down because it doesn't kick in for 15, 20 minutes. Drink the whole thing down, then you lay down, close your eyes for 15 minutes to get that physical reset in your body. And then when you wake up from your nap, the caffeine is just kicking in, you're refreshed, and you're ready to go. That's less of a spiritual practice than it is a life hack, but let me tell you, it works. My spirit was reset. I tried it. So it's unlikely that many will have such emotionally and spiritually challenging experiences as a hospital chaplain, at least not regularly. But my point in talking about my experiences at Children's Hospital is that nobody knows what they're going to have to confront in any given moment, in the next moment, or behind any given door. You just don't know. We all will at some point encounter something that's going to be a shock to our spirit. If we're not prepared spiritually to handle it, if we're not constantly working on that preparation, there can be real emotional and spiritual harm, especially as the world is wearing down so many of our spirits right now, every day. We have to nurture them. Nurturing them is even more important. And I believe we all can commit to a spiritual practice. Now, you may be lucky enough to find the energy and the time for something like a skull a day or a regular meditation or journaling, and I fully encourage that. That's great. If so, go for it. If not, recall that puttering and plopping, if done with intention, can also be sacred, spiritual, spirit-healing exercises. And I'll actually end again with Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams' words because it was just so meaningful and it really ties it all together well, much better than I could. I'll paraphrase her. She put it very succinctly, very profoundly, when she said, we want to connect with our core. So much of the way our society currently works, it's about cutting us off from that connection. And that cuts us off from what matters. We can't always find our yoga mat, she says. We can't always find our meditation cushion. We can't always burst out into ecstatic dance, even though Adam and Conrad seem to be able to do that But we can take that 30 seconds. We can take that 30 seconds. It's a muscle like anything else. You build it. You come back to what matters. You keep building that muscle. You come back to what matters. And as long as you keep coming back to what matters for you, we all benefit. And now, please rise and bow to your spirit for hymn number 21 in the great hymnal, For the Beauty of the Earth.
For the beauty of the earth, for the splendor of the skies, for the love which from our birth over and around us lies, source of all to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the joy of ear and eye, for the heart and mind's delight, for the mystic harmony, linking sense to sound and sight. Source of all to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the wonder of each hour, of the day and of the night, hill and vale and tree and flower, sun and moon and scars of light. Source of all to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the joy of human care, sister, brother, parent, child, for the kinship we all share, for all gentle thoughts and mild. Source of all to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise.
Yes. You may be seated. And at this time, I'm so grateful for everyone here welcoming me and trusting me with your worship, for David Early, who's our worship associate today, for Kevin, our pianist, for our wonderful choir. Unfortunately, Eloise had COVID, she couldn't be here, but thank you to our wonderful choir, to Adam and Conrad, who are going to beat me up later for making fun of them during the service. And for our greeters and for everyone who is preparing our coffee and treats afterwards. Thank you all so much. We can't do this with everyone. And the ushers, of course, the ushers as well. Thank you. I have my cue cards. With a benediction, once again, we'll go to Anne Lamott. She writes, I do not understand the mystery of grace, only that it meets us where we are, and it does not leave us where it found us. Thank you all.